Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. It seems I've got one last Christmas terror in store for you all, a retelling of one of my most favorite stories, for your end-of-year listening pleasure. A faithful reproduction of a little story that I like to call The Princess, the General, and the Beast.
The loud hum of choppers overwhelmed Max's sense of hearing. He could see the old man's mouth moving in a way that signaled the formation of words, and Max understood the dialect well, but he couldn't hear him. Max was a soldier in the American Army and had just had his hands full fighting insurgents with his squad and rescuing as many civilians in this small desert town as possible. It was absolute carnage. When he had first gotten here, first seen the devastation of war, he thought he'd eventually get used to it, numb to the sight of corpses. He was wrong, and part of the reason he gave the man his undivided attention was to avoid the sight of men, women, and small children that littered the dusty street like trash or roadkill. This had been the worst he had seen so far, and Max was doing his best to stifle his vomit still. The poor old man had been caught in the crossfire, like many other terrified citizens of this particular stretch of nowhere, but he was still alive. From the size of his gut wound, Max knew that this wouldn't last much longer. Before he was loaded from the stretcher to the helicopter, nearly full to maximum capacity, his wrinkled, tan, leathery fingers, made rough by the desert sands, reached out and grasped Max by his jacket, pulling him close. His other hand began reaching inside his shirt, near to his wound. Medics and infantry alike stood on alert and began yelling for Max to back away, afraid of a gun or a bomb. Max wavered for a moment or two, leaning in close, and when he slowly backed away, he asked everyone to stand down. The man was harmless, and soon he'd be dead. Max looked down at his hands, staring at the gift that he had received. The sight of slaughtered families had made him think of his own back home, and he knew before he had even looked away from the object what would be done with it. Dearest Stacy, first let me say that I miss you and Alex more than anything in the world. I hear the other guys talking about the comforts of home that they wish to get back to soon, such as air conditioning or a good old American hot dog. But all I desire is you and my daughter. I know that you think of me every day, and I take comfort in that. When I miss you the most, and feel as though I'm going to break down, I look up at the sky, and I think of you, because that not only are we both under the same sky, no matter how far apart, but I know that you're thinking of me as well at that very moment. When I close my eyes at night, I swear that sometimes I can still feel your touch, or hear Alex's laughter. God, I wish I could have been there for her first steps. The other day, we made contact with a terrorist cell. Don't worry, I'm fine, and most of the other guys are as well. This old man ended up getting wounded though, and I managed to pull him free from the hot zone. Again, don't worry, I didn't do anything crazy. The thing is, before we helivacked him out of here, he gave me something. The object I'm talking about has been enclosed with this letter. It's a doll. I know what you're thinking, and I'm way ahead of you. The thing's been inspected tenfold, and it's totally harmless. Before he was flown out, he told me thank you for saving his life, that he believed in what we're doing here, and gave me the doll that you likely now hold in your hands. He said it would protect me or something, but I couldn't catch it all before the chopper took flight. Anyway, I thought it would make a great gift for Alex. I know she's small, but there's no removable parts that she can swallow or anything. Besides, if it's for protection, I'd rather it be with you and her anyway. By now I bet you're chuckling a bit and probably thinking I made this up due to the likeness of the doll, but I'm not there to defend myself or my word, so I'll just smile at the thought of your laughter. Well, I have to cut this one short. We're moving again soon. I love you so much, Stacy. Give the baby a kiss for me, and tell her that I love her too. Counting the days until I see you again. Max. Alex's small face searched through the tall boxes of cereal and bags of chips in search for her favorite snack of the year, Christmas cookies. With delight, she spotted what she was looking for. Reaching for them, her fingers brushed against something solid, and as she touched the red and green bag, there was a loud snap that startled the small girl into banging her head on the top of the cupboard. "Ouch!" Alex called out. "Are you okay, Princess?" A gentle, maternal voice called out for her from a nearby living room door. It was her mother, Stacy. "I told you, honey, be careful in the cupboards. Don't get your fingers pinched in one of those traps," she insisted. Alex was 8 now, and although she insisted she was old enough to search for her own snacks, she couldn't reset the trap herself. Alex wondered how come all mothers seemed to know exactly what their kids were doing, even when they couldn't see them. Stacy was seeing guests out of her home, the last remnants of a vivacious Christmas Eve party. Alex entered the living room, a sugar cookie with red sprinkles and a bite taken out of it in her hand. She eyed the large glass window to her left and the falling snow outside. The door and the last of the exiting people facilitated the cold draft that blew in past the open entryway. The twinkling lights of the tree were next to catch Alex's attention, and her focus drifted to the presents wrapped with care beneath. One box in particular seized her interest greatly. It was different from the rest. All the other boxes and such were wrapped in Santa and red wreath wrapping paper, or stuffed into colorful Christmas-themed gift bags, topped off with wads of tissue paper. But this box, rectangular and not much bigger than a loaf of bread, was enveloped with the prettiest, sparkling silver wrapping paper that Alex had ever seen. It looked like a gem amidst a mountain of Christmas gold. Every Christmas Eve, after her mother's annual party, Alex would be allowed to open one gift from beneath the tree, any one of her choosing. Alex knew which one she would pick. It almost called to her. The door slammed behind the last exiting guest, and Stacy let out a sigh of relief loud enough for Alex to hear. Alex watched her mother wearily stroll into the living room, sit on the couch, plopping down on it, rubbing her face with her hands. "Mommy, can I open my present now?" Alex excitedly asked. "Huh?" Stacy mumbled back in confusion. "Oh, yeah, sure, Princess. Grab whichever one you want," she said, knowing her daughter knew the routine. Without hesitation or reserve, Alex scampered over to the tree, lifting the large silver box into her arms. Stacy eyed the girl as she did and couldn't help but smile. knowing what was inside. "I think you're really gonna like that one," she told Alex, who was now tearing off the paper that she had adorned so much in a frenzy. Beneath the shiny silver was a plain, brown cardboard surface. Peeling back the tape and pulling free the lid, Alex revealed a sight that she did not expect and fell in love with instantly. It was a doll, an army general doll, complete with bars and stars, a uniform, faded and old. The somehow familiar facial features were only made more prominent by the dark hair that sprouted from its head. "That," Stacy began, but had begun to choke on her words. With a breath and clearing her throat, Stacy started again. That's a gift from your father. Daddy sent that to you when you were just a baby. He'd gotten it from someone he saved over there," she managed to finish. Alex stared down at the doll, and the thought landed on her mind heavily, as if it was always there, just waiting to be discovered. The doll seemed familiar, because it looked like her father. Alex's father, Max, who had died overseas shortly after sending the Army General doll to his wife. His convoy was attacked while en route, and Stacy had received notice of his death only 2 weeks after receiving his gift. "So if Daddy gave this to me, why did you have it?" Alex asked her. "Oh, Princess, I just couldn't bear to part with it. I'm sorry, but it was always meant for you. And this year, I just feel ready to pass it along as I was always intended to do." Alex smirked and felt a warming sensation in her heart that nearly brought tears of joy to her eyes. Her dad had died before she had even made one memory of him. She'd never gotten a Christmas present from her father, and now it felt like she had. Alex leapt up and thanked her mother, holding her tight in an embrace. Stacy hugged her daughter back and told her that she loved her. She asked Alex if she would like a cup of hot chocolate before bed, and Alex happily agreed, skipping off upstairs. She carried her doll with her to the kitchen table, but left him next to her empty cup upon going upstairs to bed, forgetting him due to apprehension. Stacy assured her that they had had a good day, that her mind was free of worries and dark thoughts. Alex eventually agreed with her mother, but inwardly had her reservations about sleep. Alex had been suffering from terrible nightmares lately. Stacy had woken up on many of nights to the screams of her daughter down the hall. Upon rushing to her side, Alex would mumble about sharp teeth and long serpent-like tails, the details of some grotesque monster that terrorized her dreams. Halloween had just passed only a couple of months beforehand, and this year, Alex had really gotten into horror. Next year, Stacy would limit the amount of scary that Alex was allowed to consume, she reasoned with herself. Stacy reset the trap. She knew that Alex had tripped beneath the cupboard before she picked up the doll from the table, eyed it with nostalgia and love, and walked to the living room, placing it beneath the tree. The lights off, aside from the tree, doors locked, and child put down for bed. It was time for Stacy to do the same. About an hour had passed since the house had been silent with all occupants in bed. Alex stirred restlessly under her covers, unable to steady her uneasy mind. Apprehension of nightmares, even on Christmas Eve, forced her to alertness. After a time had gone by, she remembered the little general doll that she had unwrapped earlier that evening. Thinking hard about where she had left it, Alex decided to creep from her bed, down the stairs, and into her kitchen to check. Without stirring a sound to be heard, 8-year-old Alex did just that. Her bare feet softly touched the carpet, and she placed her weight on the stairs so as to not make a single creak. At the landing, she could see the kitchen and the table. No doll in sight, but the glow of the tree from the nearby living room eked around the corner to her right, enticing her towards its presence. Alex gently turned the bend and entered the room aglow with the illumination of what seemed like 1,000 twinkle lights, all embracing a tall green tree. Beneath the branches, adorned with dangling decorations and brilliant tinsel, Alex spied her doll amidst the large piles of presents near the center. Alex crept down onto her hands and knees, and the little girl crawled beneath the tree to reclaim her prize. Something about the doll made her feel safe, as if she weren't alone on this silent night. As she clasped her little hands around the doll's felt jacket, she couldn't help but notice the awe of the tree from this angle, a celestial nebula hanging in the blackness of her pupils, not unlike the cosmic lights and gases of deep space itself. The glow, the doll, the Christmas ambience, the context of her surroundings eased her anxieties faster than she had realized it happening, and her comfortability laying her small frame against the pile of wrapped presents lulled her into a deep, deep sleep. Alex awoke to a loud thump on the ceiling above her. She had no idea how long she'd been sleeping or that she'd even fallen asleep under the tree, so it took the girl a moment to gain her bearings on her surroundings. By the time she had figured out where she was, the loud thumping began to slowly start coming down the stairs nearby. It couldn't have been her mother. This was a loud, slow, methodic clomping that sounded as if it were made by a large hoof, wooden leg, or worse, something with large claws. Alex scrambled from beneath the tree, dropping the doll at her side when she did. She reached back for it, but the final thump from around the corner signaled that whatever had reached the bottom of the stairs would now soon be upon her. Terrified, the girl abandoned thoughts of her present and thought about places to hide close by instead, fearing the worst. But it was too late. She was engulfed in light, framed by the tree itself, when the monstrosity turned the corner of the doorframe. There was no way it could miss her. It was a hideous thing, a creature of black fur and long, thin, skinny limbs, ending with clawed digits. Its large head was supported by a hulking mass of a back, the spinal vertebrae jutting through the stretched-out skin and sparse fur as it curved into a prominent hunch. Long, stringy black hair dangled in patches from each part of its body, and was followed by a hairless, smooth, pale tail that was not dissimilar than that of a 6-foot wriggling earthworm. But the thing's face, its hideous face, was the thing of nightmares. And this was especially true for Alex, because the beast that stood there before her was the abomination that haunted her dreams. A long, bulbous face, ending in a large pink snout, underscored by 2 large buck-like fangs dripping with a thick, oozing crimson, and accentuated by 2 small, beady eyes that seemed to almost gleam red in the light of the tree. The little girl screamed out for her mother, out of instinct alone, but the creature was already upon her, having sprinted across the room and bounds on all 4s. As fast as it had gotten to her, it scooped her up, carrying her small body towards the basement door. The last thing Alex saw before being dragged out of sight was impossible. She couldn't have seen what her eyes told her that she had. She then pondered the absurdity of being dragged off by a 6-foot-tall rat monster, and when she felt its fur, its breath on her face, the sensations reassured her and gave her hope. For standing next to her Christmas tree, lit by the brilliance of 1,000 lights, and watching her get dragged off to her doom, was a tall man, dressed in the clothes of the General doll, and he looked uncannily like her father, come back from the dead to rescue her. Before they had gotten to the bottom of the basement stairs, the door had shut behind them, leaving the girl in total darkness, all except but a dim light off in an impossible distance for the confines of a basement. Still, logic and reason seemed to have no place here, and in the absence of immediate stimuli, she couldn't tell if it was the monster that carried her that brought the light closer, or if it had grown until it surrounded them on all sides. As if passing through a simple archway, Alex was greeted by a bitter cold and the sight of snow that blanketed a wintry landscape. Looking behind her, her basement was now gone. Only the forest and white scenery greeted her eyes. The creature set her down in the snow, her bare feet enveloped by frozen particles of ice that crept up her thin nightgown when the wind blew by. It did not speak to her, nor did it make a gesture. The beast simply wrapped a claw around the girl's right wrist, stood upright, and began trudging off into the blustery woodland, dragging the little girl behind it. Alex started to cry, and wondered if the heat of freshly fallen tears would be the only warmth that would ever grace her skin again. The creature tugged harder and tightened its grip, causing the girl to wail out before sobbing louder. Like dogs in the night, her weeps of agony were answered. Soon, a cacophony of misery began resonating through the trunks and snow-heavy boughs of this desolate frozen wasteland. The wailing of children, crowds of children, oceans of children. The sound grew so loud, Alex halted her sobs and tried to cover her ears. Due to the creature's grip, she only managed to cover one. Being dragged ever forward, they passed a clearing in the woods, though they did not enter it, and Alex was thankful for that. What appeared to be a frozen lake, covered in snow, had only been no more than 20 feet away. Alex identified the source of the ghastly wailing, and it cut her to the quick with fear. Somehow, she managed to gulp down her scream. Jutting out of the surface of that flat, snowy scene, backdropped by yet more encompassing forest, were people. Small people. Had the place been dark, or she had been further away, she may not have realized what it was. But it was bright, and she was close enough to see that it was children, frozen and frost-bitten children. Each of them looked emaciated and pale. Ice and snow clung to their eyelashes and hair. Tears were frozen, crooked lines of ice that ran from the bottom of their eyes down past the ends of their faces, leading to a pointed tip of a frozen icicle. Their bodies were half frozen into the lake below, only their torsos free to move in some kind of eternal torment, like hell. But this was not hell. Alex was a good kid, even for an 8-year-old. Alex kicked and screamed, and the rat-like creature shrieked with a monstrous squeal and struggled against her, easily overpowering her. Readying to lift her up again, both the thing and the girl noticed the sound of something crashing through the forest nearby, and each turned their heads, blood swinging wildly in the air like tendrils from the creature's snout, still wet and slick with red. Alex didn't know whether to scream in terror or joy when she spied the olive-green garments adorned with stripes and stars, but she solidified her allegiances and found a renewed sense of hope when the general's gleaming sword reached out and pierced the monster's flesh at its shoulder. The creature howled and released its grip on Alex's wrist. Alex took her opportunity and began backing away in a frantic panic. As she clambered to her feet, the man in the general's uniform swung his sword to strike again, only this time being caught by the creature's sinister right foreclaw. As the two battled in the powdery white, Alex stumbled backwards into a fallen-down log, not seeing it as her focus was on the show taking place before her. She braced herself as best she could, expecting a soft plop of a landing into the cold snow, but she felt nothing. Her body felt weightless, and her stomach lurched into her throat. The little girl watched the world before her shrink into nothing more than a pinprick of light. Alex shut her eyes tightly, knowing that she had to be dreaming, and tried to wake herself up. When she reopened her eyes, she no longer saw the black abyss of nothingness, nor the snowy wasteland filled with the cries of agonized children. But neither was she greeted with the context of waking reality. When she took in her new surroundings, the sensation of weight and substance had returned to her body, or maybe it had returned earlier and she just failed to notice it. But as it were, she was now sitting upon solid ground, or mostly solid, rather. When she set her hand and small fingers down onto the ground beside her, they sunk deep into the substrate with only the little weight of a small girl trying to lift herself to her feet. Pulling her hand back, clumps of green and brown stuck to her fingers like mud, and upon tasting it, she found it to be sweet. This, of course, made perfect sense, because the world that surrounded her was entirely made of food, sweets, more precisely. Large gingerbread houses lined streets made of brownies, giant lollipops the size of street lamps, spaced at intervals down the street in each direction. Waterfalls made of what looked like sparkling cola ran down mountainsides of large cakes and pies. Alex looked around in wonder, awaiting jelly-bean rainfall at any moment, and dismissing any apprehension of any unseen danger. She began walking down the street before her. She first noticed something was terribly wrong when she stopped to inspect one of the giant red lollipops. Although it was only semi-clear, Alex's little eyes could see something dark and motionless in the center. Alex got as close as she could and looked up, staring hard for a few moments. She turned and stood in different places so as to get a better look, and one of these angles allowed her to distinguish the outline of the motionless object trapped inside. Those little eyes grew wide, and once again she covered her mouth with two little hands, trying to hold back a scream. It was a child. Inside this giant lollipop, impaled on a large white stick through his abdomen, frozen in place like a mosquito trapped inside a large piece of translucent red amber, was a little boy. She would have turned and ran as fast as her skinny legs would have taken her, even without any actual place to go, but a nearby whimpering caught her attention, and when she looked in the direction of its source, she instantly knew it to be coming from the large gingerbread house only a few steps away. With caution, Alex crept slowly towards the front, graham cracker-looking door. It took her a while to reach, with her reservations so high, but as she did, she noticed the outline of a window on the door, an icing square divided into 4 sections with 2 lines. It was actually a real window, a vacant portal with no glass, separated into 4 pieces with white, sugary icing. Alex would realize those lines to be more like bars when a small hand and arm reached through one of the spaces. Alex screamed at the sight, imagining all kinds of monsters that may lurk on the other side. But a child's pleading for help stopped her from running yet again. "Please, help me! They're gonna eat me!" a young boy screamed. Alex rushed to the door and pushed. Not giving an inch, she gave it a kick. The substance must have only looked like crumbly graham cracker, for its resolution was like that of cement. The boy's pleas changed to panicked cries. Suddenly, the skinny arm was pulled back inside the door with haste, as if yanked inside. The boy's cries became more and more intense and desperate as Alex stood there on her tippy toes and peeked in past the icing-covered crossbars. The sight that little girl beheld would never fully leave her mind, dream or not. A large, red, humanoid-like creature with skeleton-like arms dragged a nearly naked young boy, not much older than Alex, over toward what looked like a cutting board in a kitchen. The boy's eyes met Alex's, and she watched him mouth one word to her before the creature swung a large cleaver down onto the cutting board and sliced off several of the boy's fingers. Paying no mind to his screams and shock, like it didn't even hear him, Alex watched it pick up every single digit it had cut free and toss them into a large mixing bowl, a whisk handle jutting from the top, like the children in the frozen lake. Alex watched the thing lick its claw-like fingers before picking up the cleaver and readying itself for another chop. Alex turned to face away, her eyes met with tears and her mind resolute, taking to heart the single word that the boy had mouthed to her in silence that she understood so clearly. Run. The more the little girl ran, the more this dream world changed to a land of nightmares. Cries of sorrow and pain leaked from every house. Bits of nails and bone might have been seen in the brownies that comprised the streets. A skeletal creature, like the one that she had seen chopping up that boy, sporting large bat-like wings, landed on a large lollipop and began licking it, as if completely ignoring her presence. After only a couple of licks, the thing opened its jaws far wider than it should have been able to, its orifice lined with rows of serrated, fang-like teeth, and clamped down onto the red, translucent surface. With a creaking crack and a loud pop like a gunshot, Alex watched the thing break off a large piece of the top before flying off with it in its jaws. What remained of the lollipop leaked from the chunk that had been ripped out at the top. Alex stared at the red substance that ran down its side and dripped to the ground like a gusher candy until she realized that when the sucker had been broken, it tore the center as well. The child that had been stuck inside was now missing his or her head, and fresh, uncoagulated blood flowed from the wound of the giant candy on a stick. Alex heaved at the sight and threw up at her bare feet. She knew that she would join them, that it wouldn't be long before they took her too, to bake her into one of those treats. Alex felt a firm grasp on her fragile shoulder and spun around with a shriek, sure that she was doomed. The sight of him was like a godsend, and from his looks, possibly could have been. The man in the general's uniform stood before her, an assuring smile on his face. He extended his hand for Alex's, and placing hers that looked so small in his, he took her by the hand, and together the two walked away from the streets and towards a silent horizon donned with giant boxes of cookies and bags of potato chips. Something about this man, this thing, made her feel safe, as if nothing could harm her. But her thoughts drew back to his battle with the large rat-like creature and wondered that, if he was here, maybe that monster had found his way as well. It was only a few minutes before a large box of Christmas cookies towered over them, amongst scattered fruit pies and other such sweets, and Alex's fears were realized. The girl felt a shove towards the direction of a large box, and when she turned, she saw why. In the distance, and gaining proximity very quickly, was a large black creature with a pale, earthworm-like tail. The thing had found them, and the general was urging her onward towards a tear in the wrapping. But it was too late. By the time she had figured out what was going on, the thing was upon them both. The man pushed the girl as hard as he could. Alex watched on as the man just stood there, the beast ready to lunge. He made no movement, nor did he even draw his sword. The beast leapt through the air, and Alex closed her eyes, expecting the worst, but then heard a loud snap, and then nothing. The girl opened her eyes to see the man in the uniform standing before her, looking at her with a smile. The rat creature lay dead behind him, ensnared in a giant mousetrap hidden behind some of the random lying sweets. When the thing had lunged, knowing the trap was there, the man simply stepped aside. Alex looked around. It couldn't be. The young man again reached out his hand and helped the girl to her feet. I don't understand. Who are you? She asked him. The man looked down at her and deepened his smile. He lifted his hand and gently caressed the little girl's face and whispered two things. I love you, princess. I'm sorry. Alex felt a tug at her soul to weep, but another sensation overtook her and drowned out any other sensations. It was the feeling of sleep. Unable to keep her eyes open another second, Alex fell into a deep, restful slumber. Once again, Alex lifted her eyelids, this time not only greeted with the light of the tree, but also the light of day that was shining in through the living room window. It was Christmas morning, and she was home. She'd fallen fast asleep beneath the tree, and it had all just been a really bad nightmare. Alex's thoughts on her dream dwindled with the idea of opening presents. Excited, the little girl removed herself from underneath the tree and ran towards the stairs and her mother's room. As she passed the kitchen, she paused. She couldn't help herself. She had to look. Alex crept into the kitchen and opened the cupboard door. Next to the Christmas cookies, she found two things. A large rat that had gotten caught in the trap overnight, its abdomen crushed and meat mangled at the midsection. Next to him, propped up against the Christmas cookies, was the Army General doll. Alex grimaced at the sight of the rat, grabbed up her doll, and shut the cupboard with a smile. Now eager to awake her mother, Alex continued her journey upstairs. About halfway down the second-floor hallway, the girl's pace slowed, and her jaw went slack. She knew. She knew before she had even looked inside, but she had to solidify her assumptions. Alex pushed open the partially ajar master bedroom door and went white when the blood ran from her face. Her hands trembled, causing her to drop the doll. Her mother's body lay mangled on her bed, her appendages torn from her torso, her ribcage cracked and pulled wide open, her lower jaw missing and nose removed. The only trace of the perpetrator was the trail of bloody, large, rat-like prints that led out the doorway.
Well, just because it's a Christmas story doesn't mean there can't be a decapitation or two. And really, Alex got all that she asked for and a whole lot more. But if you crave more carnage, just stop by again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.
Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.